think 12 o'clock on the dot. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Art of Modern Law Firm Strategy with John Chisholm. Before we dive in, there's just a couple of housekeeping rules that I'd like to go through quickly. We are expecting a very informative session from John, so I'm sure there will be plenty of questions. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen to send them through, and then I'll make sure that John answers them for you at the end of the webinar. We'll also have a very quick 15-second feedback poll at the end. It's really important to us that you take the time just to fill out a few of those questions and provide us some of the feedback, just so that we can make sure that we're making the sessions better and better for you. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, so you can revisit the content at any time. I will be sending out an email to all of the registrants with the link to the recording, as well as some of the resources that John has kindly included in this session, so you'll have access to it at any time. All right, so let's get started. For those of you who are new here, I just very briefly cover up what Intel is. So simply put, Intel by Practice Evolve is a series of live webinars. It stands for innovation, networking, technology, education, and leadership. And we aim to host only industry experts who share new ways of working that may challenge the status quo now, but soon will be the norm in forward-thinking legal circles. Our goal with each session is to give your firm an edge by sharing the kind of practical tools and information that will make resilience, competitive advantage, and innovation part of your everyday strategy. So with that, speaking of said experts, I'd like to officially welcome and introduce to you John Chisholm from John Chisholm Consulting. With over 4 decades of experience, John has guided numerous law firms, both in Australia and internationally, to market leadership and creating more efficient business models. Today, John will share his insights on how modern law firms can and should be leveraging the 3 Ps: purpose, positioning, and pricing as part of their strategy to stay competitive and thrive. So with that, let's dive into the good stuff. John, I'm going to pass the controls to you to take over.
Thank you, Irina. So have I got the controls? I'm glad I'm not talking on technology. That's all I can say.
Yeah, you should be able to. Yeah, there you go.
Here we go. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us. And I am feel very privileged to be part of Practice Evolve's Intel series. Erin is right. I'm going to be talking about purpose, positioning, and pricing. Now, for some of you, maybe that's not new. And I really want to concentrate on the interrelationship, the alignment between purpose, positioning, and pricing. And personally, I just don't think you can optimize your price if you don't know your positioning, and I don't think you can optimize your positioning if you don't know why you do what you do. And I'd also like to convince you, and for those of you who have heard me speak before or seen whatever I've written, while what any law firm prices has the greatest effect by far on its profitability, and I think the only thing that even comes close to that is having client selection, I think how a firm, any firm prices, has the greatest effect on that firm's culture. So I want to start off with the purpose. And look, I imagine most of you at some stage have read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, and maybe follow him or read some of his other books too. And I won't repeat ad nauseum his golden circle, but I think Simon, as indeed others, he puts forward a really compelling case that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Now, I don't know whether you believe that or not, but when I was thinking about this, last week I had a experience. We were away, the family, grandkids, everything on the Sunshine Coast, to use the word sunshine advisedly, because it did rain a fair bit up there. But I swim every morning, get in the ocean, and I did so up there where we were staying on the Sunshine Coast. And I get out of the water about 7 o'clock and looking for a place to have coffee because I've got to have my caffeine fix after I swim. And there weren't many, a lot of coffee shops around there, but not many open. There was one that was open at 7 o'clock, and I got talking to the proprietor and asked him how business was, and as indeed most small businesses through hospitality said how hard it was, especially during COVID and increased costs and all that sort of stuff. But I sort of, and he told me about why he runs this coffee shop, because his parents who came from Europe, opened up a cafe coffee shop, and he's continued on the tradition. But I asked him, I said, what time do you open in the morning? And he said, 6 o'clock. And I said, 6 o'clock? That's early. Do you get many customers at 6 o'clock? And he said, no, sometimes only have one customer. I said, so why do you open so early? And he said, see that lady sitting over there? And there was a lady sitting there, older than me, believe it or not, there are people older than me. And he said she swims every morning at 6 o'clock, and she needs to be back home by 7 o'clock because she's a carer for her disabled husband. And I didn't used to open my cafe till 7 o'clock, but I was here one morning early a year or so ago, and I saw her coming out of the water and she had nowhere to go. And I opened my coffee shop at 6 a.m, even if there's no one else there, so she can have a cup of coffee before she goes back to look after her husband for the rest of the day. And I thought, wow. For that whole week I was up there, that's the only place I went for coffee, and took my wife and kids and stuff. And I just thought, that's a fantastic why. That's a fantastic purpose. I'm sure he's not making any profit opening it at 6 a.m. in the morning, but the fact that he did something like that, I just thought, wow, you have something, you're doing something with a greater purpose than just to make money. I don't know, if I asked any of you, what's your purpose in life? What's your purpose in the legal profession? Is your personal purpose the same as the purpose in your firm? What would you tell me? And I don't know, if you're a lawyer, can you remember why you studied law in the first place? Was it, I don't know, to deliver justice for all, to help people, to make money? I personally think only mints can make money, but was it to earn a living, or did you even think about why you became a lawyer? When I'm working with lawyers, I often ask, what's their, individually or collectively, what's their purpose? What's their why? Why did they join the legal profession? And is their purpose, whatever it was at the beginning, the same as it is now? Is the reasons the same, or have the reasons changed? And you might be surprised at some of the answers I get. And I'm generalizing, I know, but it seems to me over the years when I've asked this question, the longer a lawyer has been in practice and the size of the firm has some bearing on their answers. And for some of the partners that are perhaps my age, when I ask them that question, I get the response, well, where else would I earn the money I do? What else would I do? And interestingly, in some firms, when I ask the younger lawyers what they think their partner's purpose is, or their partner's reason for running the law firm, what do you think they answer? They answer almost to make money. And I just think that's pretty sad, isn't it? That even if the partners themselves don't actually think or say that they're in it to make money, some of the younger lawyers think by the partner's actions or behaviours that that's their purpose. And I think many of us have lost, our real purpose for doing something. I know I did, and when I started running my consultancy practice now nearly 20 years ago, I had to start thinking about what was my purpose for doing this. And a few years ago, I came up with what I thought was my why, my purpose, and Even though I thought, well, particularly with pricing and value-based pricing, I could change the world and I could make lawyers do all these things. When I sat back and really thought about it, my own personal purpose was to influence motivated professionals to make a difference. And I think at best, I can only influence people. I can only influence motivated professionals. If they're not motivated, they're not going to change, particularly some of the things I talk about. And I want them to make a difference. I can't make a difference. So I just wonder, I don't know, what your purpose is and what. So just trying to change the screen. Yeah, no, not working. Ah, here we are. Some of you may have seen this. Peter Drucker, I don't know, nearly 50 years ago, said these are the 5 most important questions for any business. What is our purpose? Or to quote Simon Sinek, what is our why? Who is our customer? What does our customer value? I think that's the one of the most important, at least asked questions. What are our results? And what is our plan? Again, how do you know if you've reached deep enough to find your purpose? I think it's inspiring. I think it's about meaning. It's not about money. And I think also it comes from the inside, not what other people think you should believe in. It's what you really believe in. And I just honestly think in some small way it contributes to something greater than just earning a living. And sure, it may be difficult to fully achieve. Some of you would have seen, and I don't know who to acknowledge this slide to, but I think that sums up, what purpose is all about, the intersection of passion, mission, profession, and vocation. And the Japanese have a word for that, ikigai, which I think roughly translated means something like life purpose. And they believe that ikigai lies at the intersection of these multiple factors. The mission, how can you contribute to making the world a better place? Passion, do we get a sense of joy in fulfilling our purpose? The profession, is it a career like law that maybe serves the world a better place? Does it ignite our own interest? And the talent each day, or the vocation, spend each day doing something that we love. And great if you're getting paid for that. So I just think that at times we have to revisit what is our purpose for doing what we're doing. Why do we get up every morning and either go to work or work at home? And is it fulfilling enough to continue doing the way we are doing things, or perhaps do we have to change? Some of you may be old enough to know this guy. I think there was a reason Martin Luther King said, I have a dream, and not I have a business plan, because I think as human beings, we follow dreams. We don't follow business plans. I don't know what your experience is, but when I was managing partner or CEO of law firms, business plans remained in a bottom drawer. They were pulled out annually to revisit. But I think what is really inspiring is following a dream, hopefully your own dream. And this leads on to positioning. And some of you may have seen this before. I love this Alice in Wonderland quote. Where are we heading? Where are we going? Don't care much, then it doesn't matter which way you go. Is this your positioning in the marketplace? I think that's akin to what I call the old law mantras. I've never met a billable hour I don't like yet, so I'm going to take on any sort of clients. And is this your mission? Hopefully it's not, but some firms it is. It's pretty much what every our competition does, but 6 months later. I don't know what it says on your website, but I still look at firms' websites, and firms talk about full service. I just think that's rubbish. That's crap, full service. What is full service? What's the opposite of full service? Half service. And I think, and you'll hear me quote Tim Williams ad nauseum, and if anyone has read, or certainly if you haven't read this book, Positioning for Professionals, how professional knowledge firms can differentiate their way to success. I just think it's a terrific roadmap, and Tim says, and he's quite right, a clear differentiating position strategy results in a well-defined set of criteria. It identifies your ideal clients. You get a stronger win ratio when soliciting new business because you play to your strengths, and there's a clearer direction for how your firm should spend its time and money and resources. And it gives a much broader, not narrower, geographical market. And I think, if we're specialists in certain areas, we just have fewer competitors because there are fewer firms that do what you do. And I think those firms that I've worked with that are specialists have better margins and can command higher prices. And again, these are quotes from Tim's book. And there is no competitive advantage in trying to do everything others do. And when you do everything for everybody, the only leverage that you have is doing it, more of it faster. And we know ourselves that we can't be all things to all people. And I think clients come to us or come to you as lawyers for something, not for everything. And, I don't know, what makes your firm stand out from the crowd? What makes your firm remarkable? What have you got that very few of your competitors have? Again, I look at firms' websites, and most, take away the colours and the logos and, fancy. Most of us, or many of us, say the same things that our competitors do. I think personally, and you'd expect me to say this, that saying that you'll never receive a tax invoice from my firm that you have not pre-authorised is a great way to differentiate your firm. But there are other ways of doing it. I often get, and maybe you're sitting there thinking the same thing, that I can't differentiate. I offer the same thing other firms do, and it's some of the work I do is commoditized work, and I just don't believe that. I think if we can differentiate toilet paper and bottled water and that as professionals, as human beings, we can differentiate anything that we offer. But if you think you're a commodity, you are. And I just think it's quite demeaning to really good lawyers that often we let ourselves feel that, be dragged into what we're offering is the same as every other firm. It's not. It shouldn't be. I like this positioning strategy framework, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's just a way of looking at things. What do we do? What are your outstanding competencies? In which areas is your firm considered best in class? What's the one thing that your firm is most known for? What would we look like if we only had one service line? And I think, a question I like to ask some of my clients at times, what would we do if we were starting to practice for the first time? Would we do the same things? Would we look like we're doing now? What different or genuinely innovative services do we offer? The who do we do it for? Who is our ideal client? Which industries or business categories do we know best? In which categories, for instance, do we have 3 or more substantial clients? And I think it's important to segment and really look at our ideal client strategy. How's your firm distinguished by the way it thinks? Do you have some unique philosophies or methods or approaches? Is your culture genuinely different to other firms? Can we be distinguished by the way we think? Do we, for instance, have a unique approach to such things as workflow management? Do the methods and approaches we use differ from other firms? To what extent have we developed proprietary methodologies help us create value for our clients? And I just think we've tended to try and imitate, and I know I, did that to some degree. We used to look at, I used to look at the bigger firms and say, wow, if they're doing that and they're doing it right and they're making money, we should do that. But I just think there's so many opportunities for firms to differentiate themselves. And of course, then there's the why. Why do we do it? Beyond making money, what is our purpose, and what significant, contribution do we make? Not just to our firm, but to the world at large. Tim Williams, and you can do this yourself if you want to, is ask these questions in a differentiating strategy. We've effectively identified what we do best. We have a clear definition of our ideal client. We target a specific segment of the market. We try to focus on what we do best instead of attempting to offer everything. We are concerned with making our firm different as we are with making it better. And we avoid imitating the claims of our competitors. And as I said before, I think power is with the specialists, and it's not necessarily a specialist area of law. It could be in an industry. It could be just with the methodology you're doing. Because specialists in any industry, as I said before, they command the highest prices. They have the largest geographical market and they have the fewest competitors. Many of you would have read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I do like this quote, and I've always liked this quote. If you want to make minor incremental changes, you work on your practices. But if you want to make significant quantum changes, we have to work on our paradigms. We have to work on our mindsets. We have to look, and I think, particularly if moving to what I think is a much more client-focused way of looking at the world, and certainly if you're going to move away from the billable hour and this we sell time mantra that's, we've had in our industry for 30 or 40 years, we have to make a paradigm shift. And some of you would have seen this before, but the late Professor Michael Hammer, again, his quote, "A professional is someone who is responsible for achieving a result rather than performing a task." And the billable hour mires us not just in time, but in tasks. And we need to move away, I think, as a profession, from concentrating on inputs and activities and tasks and time to what clients really value and what clients really buy from us. And that is outcomes, outputs, and results. And I know we can't always guarantee results, and I hear what you say, but I think we can often guarantee outcomes and outputs. And I know some of you have heard me say this before, but I just think it's so demeaning in the extreme, particularly to good lawyers, that their value to clients and themselves has been relegated to a unit of time. I mean, we still try, we get the best and brightest out of law school, out of university, and what do many firms still do? Make them account for every 6 minutes of their day. I think it's just silly. And it's, even if it was something that had good reasons in the 20th century for whatever, the world has changed. The world has changed now. It's 2024. And I wish I wasn't standing here today and saying, well, let's move away from the billable hour in 2024. I wish it wasn't a differentiator or competitive advantage, but it still is. It won't always be the case. But I think pricing by time or billing by time just has less and less relevance. I don't know. I was a Milton. Maybe some of you are a Milton. I think these days, particularly with Gen I and other legal tech, you know, the time it takes to take something is not relevant, or it's certainly not as relevant as what it used to be in the past. Again, I just want to make this distinction. Billing, when you talk about billing, whatever your billing practice is, that's something that takes place after the work is done. Pricing is something that takes place before the work is commenced, however you price. And again, I think there is, as professionals, as lawyers, there is great nobility in being paid what you're worth. And I think there are very few things as demeaning as when you have to reduce your prices, or, you know, if you're working in the time-based environment, write off time. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible to be able to do that. And I think, you know, for the work that I've done in this field over the last 15 years or so, it's as much about self-esteem as it is anything else. And what I try and do is give lawyers confidence to believe that, and to better understand the true value that they're providing to their clients. And it's not just based on a unit of time. I use the terminology value pricing, or timeless pricing, or aligned pricing, or agreed or consensus pricing, but whatever it is, it's a pricing model where we price up front. And the price is based on the perception of the value to be created for our client. And if the client accepts a quote, we have a fixed price agreement or cost agreement, whatever you want to call it. And whilst I'm a big proponent of value-based pricing, as most of you know, I'm also doing more and more work with firms in subscription model pricing, where firms are signing up clients to a subscription model. We can talk about that and deep dive into that some other time, but a subscription, even value pricing, still it prices a client and prices a transaction, whereas a subscription model and the pricing that's involved in a subscription model more prices the relationship we have with our clients. Again, most of you know this, menu or list prices. I don't know whether you have list prices on your website, but I think the most powerful thing about value and subscription pricing is not just the price certainty, and we all know about the bill shock that clients get, but it forces us as lawyers to have a conversation upfront with our client about our service, our outcomes, and our price, and also, of course, scoping the work. Again, some of you would have seen this slide before, but the cost plus pricing, it's probably not even pricing, it's billing, is we do the service, we have a cost which is made up of our billable hours. At the end of it, from a client's perspective, that becomes a price. But the client doesn't see value until they've got your bill at the end of the day, and then they have to compare the price they're paying to the service and the outcomes they've received. And the client, I think, on a cost plus billing model, is at the end of the value chain, whereas in value-based pricing, we sit down, we have a value conversation with our client, understand what's important to the client, and we try and scope a value or scope of work. Then we do the value, we have a price for that value. Sure, we've got to make sure our costs are less than the price that we've quoted, and then we do the service. But the client is at the beginning of the value chain under a value-based pricing model, not at the end. Again, you'll get these slides, and this slide is just there to show, you know, whether it's a menu price, a value-based price, or a fixed price. And there's this, you know, wrong idea in in the legal profession I come up with all the time, that there's only two ways to bill or price clients. One is by a billable hour, and the other is, you know, a fixed fee. And that's not true. There are so many different pricing alternatives out there. And, you know, I have to say, in some of the firms I work with, even their fixed fee is based on time in advance. So, you know, I think it's just time-based billing in disguise, personally. But you know, a true fixed fee is working out with your client what they value and going back to your client, not just with a scope, but with a price or prices that they agree up front. 6 key takeaways, just quickly. Value is subjective. That's the other thing that I like about value pricing, that, you know, clients see value differently. Clients see different things you do differently. And like beauty, value is in the eye of the beholder. And it's our client's perception of value. At best, all we can do is influence that client's perception of value. Pricing is contextual. And value, we also talk about profit centers in firms, and that really, everything in our organisation, in our firms, is a cost center. And the value is only created outside our firm, and only when you know, a client pays us for that value that we have created. I think personally, if clients care about time, the only time they really care about is turnaround time. We make them pay for activity time, whereas in other industries, other businesses, it's turnaround. It's turnaround. If I can get something to a client tomorrow, whereas my competitors can't get it to a client, you know, for 2 weeks or a week or whatever, why should I be penalised if I'm a smarter lawyer, which I never was, but if I can use technology or whatever and get something out quicker? Clients may pay for that turnaround time, for urgency. I'm telling nothing you don't know, but there should never, ever be any surprises in pricing. And I think, you know, days of the bill shock should be long gone, but I still hear it. I still hear it from general counsel. I still hear it from clients out there that they get bill shock. They were given estimates, or worse still, ranges, and guess what? The final bill was in excess of that, sometimes far in excess of it. And sure, the lawyer will say, well, we did the work and there were unexpected things. I get that, but that's not the way we should be doing business in the 21st century. And just this last point, pricing our own work is not great. That's why many firms have either set up pricing councils or pricing buddies or whatever. I'm as brave as a lion pricing your work. Why? Because I don't have to face your client. And I think if those firms, even those firms that are still using the billable hour to some degree, when they've had a pricing buddy or someone that they can talk to about their pricing, they just do get higher prices. There's a reason agents and actors use agents, not because they want to give away 15 or 20% of their gross, is because they're better off talking up the value of their clients and talking up the price. So this is just a list of what I see out there. The most innovative firms are doing it, and they're not estimating or doing ranges. They're not doing the retrospective billing anymore. They say no to even things like cap rates and blended rates. And I think that one, measuring and rewarding time, that's hard. I get that. Even with the firms that have made the transition from moving from we sell time to, you know, fixed fees or value-based pricing up front, you know, one of the problems they have is if their measurements and rewards are still based around time, you're going to get this, you're going to get some real problems. So we do have to look at smarter ways in which we measure and reward the professionals in our firm. discounting. I just hate discounting. We shouldn't discount. Price your clients, not the work. Understand that value is subjective. We have to have a value conversation with our clients up front. We have to understand what's important to them. And sure, we can influence their perception of value, but at the end of the day, we have to understand what they think is important to them and then work out whether we can actually create that value for them. Focus on outcomes, align your prices with your positioning, your brand. And I think, you know, in other industries, pricing is a core competency. When I was running law firms, and I said pricing is not a core competency. Hourly rates and timesheets, it's the easiest, laziest way to bill. And I think there are just better, more sophisticated ways of being able to price our services that create not only value to the clients, but also allow us as good lawyers to capture more value and get higher prices. After action reviews, can talk about that at some stage if you want to, but I think that's one of the greatest learning tools ever in the clients that have moved and made a transition to value-based pricing. They look, particularly after large matters, and they stand around and they decide what happened, what was meant to happen, and did we create value to our clients? And it's a great learning tool around the firms. So lawyers that price for value, they have a clear purpose, strategy and position. Pricing is a core competency. And just understand, we don't sell time. Clients don't buy time from us. If this afternoon or tomorrow ask your best client what they buy from you, I'm sure they'll tell you maybe how we build them, but it's not time what they buy from you. So I think as a profession, after all these years, we've just got to stop selling something clients don't buy. And, you know, we have to get better at saying no to clients that either are not aligned with us or we can't create value to, or just the wrong clients for us. And, you know, low value doesn't always mean low profitability. It just may be clients we don't like working with. One of my purpose doing what I do as a consultancy is only work with clients I like. That's great if you can have that. And I know when I was in a law firm, we didn't always have that luxury, but we can choose, just as clients can choose to work with us, we can choose what clients we want to work with. And particularly if you're a larger firm, but even some of the small firms I work with, they have a value council and they don't price their own work. And instead of key performance reviews, they have key predictive indicators, and they are much better at project management. I think, I'm not saying that time is not unimportant, particularly when you're planning things in the future. And, you know, it's about project management. When something hits the timesheet, the horse is bolted. It's in the past, but good lawyers, good project managers, you know, look at time in advance, and certainly for capacity planning, it's important to do that. Now, I know that I've, you know, skipped over a lot of these, and hopefully you have a lot of questions to ask, but I just think, and I know it's happening, and certainly with Gen AI, and that's fantastic. You know, why invest in technology or Gen AI to make things happen quicker and you're still going to bill by time? It's just going to be a downward spiral for us as lawyers. So I think, you know, we can maintain, if not increase, our prices. But, you know, as I said, just pricing up front gives more, not just certainty to our clients, but certainty to us. The firms that I work with, they just don't have these lockup or debtor days or whatever, because they've agreed not just their prices, but their terms of payment, and they don't have cost disputes. And I think the cash flow that, you know, firms, even if their prices don't increase, just having better cash flow, not having any cost disputes with clients is a fantastic way to run your practice, and the time that's taken with cost disputes. You may have other disputes if you haven't done the work, I understand that, or you've stuffed something up, but you are just not going to have cost disputes with your clients. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Rena?
Thank you so much, John. It's a lot of food for thought, for sure. And we do have some questions actually that have come in, so bear with me. Pull them up. An anonymous attendee has asked if they will receive a recorded version of the webinar. Yes, you will. We've also got a question that's come in. So, in implementing value-based pricing, how can a firm best figure out and measure the perceived value to the client, especially in complex cases where the outcomes are uncertain and the value may not be immediately evident?
Yeah, fair question. And I guess one of the things that should point out, not always can we price or should we price something from go to woe. I mean, I do understand that there is uncertainty. There's uncertainty in building a complex building or a house or whatever. So, but I think many of the firms I work with have staged pricing or phase pricing or milestones or whatever. So, and if something materially changes in the scope, and I understand that can happen. I don't mean because something happens, it takes an extra 6 minutes or an hour to do something. I mean, if there's a material change in scope, then yeah, we sit down with our client, have a discussion as to what the next stage is going to be, agree on the price. That's why I like terms like agreed pricing, because it's agreeing. It's agreeing on the next scope with the client, and it's agreeing on the price, but it's always agreeing upfront. But yep, I do understand there's complexity and a lot of things that lawyers do. But I think when we move away from the we sell time, we can be more creative, not just in the pricing, but in coming up with creative solutions. And we're not mired in the time. We just have to break that nexus between time and cost and price. But yep, I think as I said, doing phased or stage pricing that some firms do is not just an advantage to the law firm, but also to the client. But also the client is always aware of what the price and the next stage is going to be.
Thank you, John. We have another question here. In one of the previous slides, you mentioned routinely reviewing and firing low value clients. How should we decide which clients are low value, and how do you have that delicate conversation with them without harming the firm's reputation?
Yeah, no, and that's a fair question. I mean, the easiest answer is you don't take on those clients in the first place, whatever your client selection policy is. But and when I say low value, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a low fees you're getting out from it. It may just mean that they're not providing value to you, or they're not part of the specific areas of work that you're doing. So firing clients is hard. I admit that, but it can be something akin to this. It's not you, it's me. I've changed. We've changed what we're doing for a client, and we're just not the right firm for you anymore. So, I mean, if you're truly looking at client focus, you send them to someone who can better do the work for them, or is better aligned with wherever they are. But I think there's a transition, and for most of the firms I've worked with, if they may put up with those clients for good reason, but it's the new clients or new potential clients that they're much more selective. They're much more selective about saying no to. And look, I understand, even though I say, let's move away from the billable hour and get rid of the timesheets. tomorrow. That, for most firms, that can't happen. Why can't it happen? Because we have legacy issues, because we have clients that, you know, signed up to hourly rates or whatever, and you just can't drop them like that. I understand that. So with many of the firms that I've worked with over the years, they have a drop dead date that 12 months time, we're no longer going to bill any clients by time, or we're going to get rid of our timesheets, and we tend to work back from there.
Thank you. We've got another question come through anonymously. How would you go about deciding what your agreed price would be? For example, for a contracting hour agreement, some take longer than others.
I don't know what that, and I do understand some things will take longer than, and look, we as human beings, we're terrible at estimating time in advance. We always get it wrong. We always underestimate, you know, time in advance. That's the problem, where if, you know, why often there is a tax invoice that exceeds what the estimate was. But if we're good enough lawyers, we will have some idea whether there's going to be some complexity or added time. And I don't necessarily suggest, because you have a shareholders agreement, that it's $1,500 or $3,000. You know, that's menu pricing for all. You may decide to do that, and then you just have to wear it if some take longer than others. But for some firms, they will sit down and either, you know, price it to a certain phase, or they'll say, if there's going to be more discussions, they'll have an additional price. But again, it's just agreeing the price up front. And look, we all make pricing mistakes. I do. But firms that bill by time make billing and pricing mistake. It's called write-offs. And I think if we've agreed on a price and it's taken longer or whatever that it's taken, well, start with suck it up, just do the work, but then learn from that. So maybe next time we don't replicate that, you know, that mistake. And I guess the only other thing I'd say, you know, for some firms, they will get better prices, or have been able to get better prices, because they're delivering higher value to clients who can afford it. And that's allowed them, because it's something they want to do, so to subsidise other clients. They may make a decision because it's the right thing to do, it's in community benefit or whatever, that, yeah, we are still going to take on a certain number of clients where we're either not going to charge them anything, or we're going to charge them a lesser fee. I get that, and I can understand that. But I think it's, you know, again, I get back to pricing the client. Those that you're delivering higher value, you know, price higher. And that's the problem I have with the hourly rate. It's just, it assumes every hour has the same value. It assumes every piece of work we do for our client has the same value, and it assumes every client has the same value. And that's far from the case.
Thank you, John. We keep having questions come in, so we've got another 12 minutes or so for that. Another question: for litigation matters, invoicing cost orders, the court scales have moved significantly towards time-based billing, so the activity needs to be recorded that way to recover. How is this overcome in the no timesheet, no value-based billing firms?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to be, that's not quite talking about under Supreme Court rules changes in Victoria. For a start, that's about cost recovery. So it's not about how you may agree something with your clients up front. This is about recovering, you know, costs from the other side. So let's be upfront about that, and that's a specific sort of matter. Also, in those changes, it still allows of law firms that have not agreed with their client to bill by time. So there still is an allowance to that. I know it's been because the old Supreme Court costing rules were so outdated and whatever, that needed to be cleaned up. And sure, it has tried to come up with, I think, a quick fix in terms of much more on the billable hour. And I'm not saying you don't keep records of your activities on the file or everything, but there's nothing there. There is nothing in any of legislation or regulations that mandates a law firm has to keep a record of time. It just is a furphy. But in terms of, you know, recovering from, you know, the other party, remembering that's just a limited amount of what lawyers do in all fields of work. But yep, the litigators were still, and there are firms that don't, you know, many of the plaintiff firms, they don't record time. They may have to reinvent it if they're doing cost recovery, but if you look at what the changes are, there is still allowance for firms to not bill by time. So again, I get that all the time from lawyers, and I know from litigators, and I understand that litigation is, you know, probably the last bastion, but there are firms that do lawyers that do litigation out there that do not bill by time and price in phases or milestones or what have you.
You may have just answered this one, John, but a question from David. There are some firms that say they do fixed fees, but still keep track of their time for internal purposes or management. What's your response to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, if you don't have a rapport or you don't, you know, manage your people well or whatever, and you want them to track time, fine. If that's what you want to do, but why do it in 6-minute units? And come on, if you're tracking time, then it's just time. But some of those firms that say that still put an hourly rate onto their time. So I just wonder whether they're being disingenuous about the, but look, if that's the way that you manage your people and you want to manage them with time and seeing what, you know, if you don't believe what they say they do all day, that's up to you. I still think, though, it just mires us in time. And if you talk to those firms that have made the transition to value-based pricing or any form of upfront pricing, one of the first things they will say is, I wish we had got rid of our timesheets earlier, because until you get rid of that cuddy blanket, whatever, you'll always, I think, you know, mire yourself in time equals price equals costs, and you know, it's just not the case. But yeah, I do understand it's hard to change that. I just think the more competent and confident any lawyer can get with their pricing and understanding the value that they provide to their clients, the timesheets just become redundant. They really do. And I also think there's a trust issue. If you don't trust what some lawyer's telling you they did today, then you'll get a greater problem than you know, whether they're filling out their timesheets correctly or not. But
thank you, John. You suggested moving to key predictive indicators instead of time recording. Can you explain this in more detail?
yeah, so key predictive indicators are more about what are indicators that our firm is heading in the right direction. Key performance indicator, you know, KPIs, usually things what's happened in the past. They don't often help us about what's happening in the future. So some of the firms, and I don't know whether there are any online now, but they have a different set of measurements and rewards, and you know, it can be things like you know, client feedback, customer feedback, turnaround time, innovative, you know, creative solutions, or things like a list of those things. Even for some firms that are making that transition, okay, we're going to do a increased percentage of firms of new clients that are going to be priced up front instead of billed by time, things like that. There's a whole, anyone DMs me, I can send you a range of those, but it does mean changing our reward and our measurement system to, I think, things that are much more valuable to our firm. Time-based billing tells us nothing about the health of our practice, really, except that we've recovered some fees that may or may not equate with the time put on the clock. It doesn't tell us how satisfied or happy our clients are. It doesn't tell us about, whether we getting referrals from, better clients in the future, those sorts of things. So there is a, range of both firm-wide, I think, predicators as well as individual ones. But it does, and I get back to saying it's a paradigm shift. It's a mind shift change. It's a business model change. What I'm talking about with the purpose and our positioning in the marketplace and our pricing, it's just so hard to do under what I call the old law business model, which still leverages people by time, by hourly rate. We have to make a paradigm shift. It's a business model change. And I get that that's hard, but I think not only will the firms be better for it and those that work in the legal profession, but so will our clients.
Thank you, John. We've got probably one more question before we run out of time. Before I go into that, there's just a comment from Stephen saying it took us 5 months to stop recording time after we went 100% value-based pricing, 7 years in, and we should have stopped recording time from the start.
Well, what can I say? I didn't put Stephen up to say that, but yeah, I think in it can be done. I know it's a bit scary, but maybe risky, but how's Bell's profit comes from risk. And we're, as I said, I just think it's so demeaning to really good lawyers that were far better than me as practicing lawyer, that all what they do is relegated to a unit of time. And it just doesn't make sense in the 21st century. And some of those firms that have made the transition, Lynn & Brown in Perth and Moores, and they'll tell the same story, I think, about once they got rid of their timesheets, and they're still in practice. I guess they're still profitable. I haven't heard otherwise. And then there's a whole heap of law firms that started up, just they never billed by time or time recorded. Matthew Burgess's View Legal, Hive Legal, Bromfield Family Law, Elevate Legal, Law Squared, none of them bill by time. They don't keep timesheets. In-house Nous is another one that's made the transition from billing by time to pricing up front. And I don't know, they say they're better off and their clients love it.
John, thank you very much. That was a very thought-provoking session, I'm going to say, based on the amount of questions that were flowing in. Really appreciate your time. You did include some other handy resources, which I'll put up on the screen, but I will make sure to send those links out to everybody alongside the webinar recording. And finally, if you enjoyed this session, please do join us for our next one with Melissa Lyon. She will be talking to us about legal design thinking for future-ready law firms. Thank you very much for joining. For those of you who are still on, please do fill out the poll, which I will launch in a second. For your feedback, I'll leave that up for a few minutes. And I hope to see you soon again for the next session. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Erin.
Bear with me. Always lose the button. There we go. Can you see that on your screens? John, thank you very much for your time. Guess 1 minute to go, but you are free to hop off.
Thank you, and thanks Practice Evolve for putting on this series. And yeah, that Mel Lyons one on legal design thinking I'll be attending that. I think what Mel has to say about legal design is just fantastic.